Thank you for joining us for the Arts and Democracy podcast, a global conversation with Olga Levina. For the free world to protect democracy, we have to explore and understand what democracy is, why it is so important to protect, and how democracies rise and fall throughout the history of humanity, what its promise is, and what role do the arts play in a democratic society. Now, please welcome our host, Olga Levina.
Hello, I'm Olga Levina, executive producer of Jersey City Theater Center, and this is Arts and Democracy. I've spent my life believing that the arts are not luxury. They are essential to our wellness, the way we connect and build communities. Through this podcast, I want to explore how creativity and civic life come together, how arts, activism, and everyday activists and everyday people use their voices to make change and bring us closer. And every episode will cross borders, share stories, and discover how art helps us imagine a more just and compassionate world. Because to me, art has always been more than performance or beautiful painting on a wall. Art's always been a bridge, an act of hope. And today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce someone who is a true bridge builder, Donna Walker-Kuhne. Donna, please welcome. I am so excited. I have your book right here, and I'm reading every night after my many, many meetings. Champions for the Arts, everyone. It is, even if you're in art, it's must. And if you are not in arts, you will learn so much from Donna's book. So please order and make sure it is one of the books on your list for 2026. So, Donna, because
Yeah.
I started as a dancer, my first question from dance, first of all, how did you start in dance?
How did I start dancing?
Yes,
Okay.
how
Well,
did you
first of
start
all,
dancing?
thank you so much for having me here on your show. I'm so excited and it's just wonderful. So thank you. Thank you. I started as a dancer when I was 5 years old. My mom took my sister and I to see the Bolshoi Ballet in Chicago, and I saw Maya Pleskoskaya in the role of Swan Lake, and I just said, that's me. That's what I want to do. I'm going to be a ballerina. So that moment, the seed was planted, and my entire life has been responding to that moment.
You made me cry because she's my absolute favorite.
Margot Fontaine, my twin sister and I, we followed them with Rudolph Nureyev and then later Misha. Those were like
Yes.
we just watched everything we could for them because we studied ballet assiduously in Chicago. We were both really good. And, my mom kept us in classes, and then later we joined a dance company in Chicago, and we performed African dance, we performed modern and jazz. But dance is the core who I am. I see the world through the lens of dance. I see it.
Yes. Oh,
So, yeah.
thank you so much for this. Have you seen or spoken to Plisetskaya after, like, when you traveled, when you
That
maybe?
would be nice. I have been able to meet Misty Copeland, so I'm very excited about that. That I've been able to see our reigning, Black prima ballerina. And of course, Virginia Johnson. All my work at Dance Theater of Harlem was very much focused on, classical ballet. Neoclassical ballet was very much in the Balanchine tradition. So I really learned that. And the music of that was wonderful.
Can you please also mention the companies you danced with, because you danced professionally?
Yes, in Chicago, I danced with two companies, the Julian Swain Inner City Dance Theater, and Nejwa Dance Corps. Actually, my family, we're co-founders of Nejwa Dance Corps, which still exists. It's been around for over 50 years. And we have a junior company, and we perform all over the city of Chicago. I
Wow.
don't perform as a dancer anymore. Long time. When I started practicing law, I couldn't do all of that. So I just took classes, and then my career was as an attorney.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Donna. What was that, turning point in your life as an artist, in your career, when you realized that you would like to work on another side, on audience development side, on community building and engagement side? Can you tell us a little bit about
Of
that?
course.
What was that
Yes.
moment?
I started doing volunteer work while I was practicing law as an assistant corporation counsel in family court in Brooklyn, New York. And I had a yearning for more. I still wanted to be involved in the arts. I knew I wasn't going to be a professional dancer anymore, but I wanted to see how can I support? What else can I do? And so across the street from family court was the Thelma Hill Performing Arts Center, a presenting arts organization that presented dance, jazz, gospel, concerts. And so I just went across the street and I opened the door and I said, this is my future. This is what I can do. And I didn't even know what that meant. There was no such thing as arts administration in the early 80s. There was no program to take to develop the muscles and skills. So I taught myself how to be an arts administrator while I was prosecuting these juveniles during the daytime. And so my lunch hour started to extend and extend. So instead of 1 hour across the street, it was more like 3 hours. And judges were looking for me, and I knew I had found my passion and my mission. And so I resigned from family court and I wrote a proposal because I taught myself how to do all this stuff on my lunch hour. So I figured out how to write a proposal and do a budget to pay myself as the managing director of the Thelma Hill Performing Arts Center. And that's really launched my career as an arts administrator, focusing on building audiences for arts performances.
So did you submit that proposal to them? How
Oh,
was
yeah.
the interview? Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how I got paid. I still have bills to pay, even though I was married. And my husband at the time was very supportive, but I still needed to, generate income. New York, you got to have some
Of course.
streams
So
of
you just
income.
submitted your proposal and you got hired.
Yes.
And incredible.
And I did that for
So
about a year. And then I really wanted to get back to ballet. Ballet just was calling me. And I said, where can I go? And I remembered Dance Theater of Harlem. And they were very successful and they were touring. So I wrote a letter to Arthur Mitchell, who was the founder and artistic director. And the day my letter arrived, his marketing director had resigned. And it was 2 weeks before their New York season. And they needed a lot of help with ticket sales. And so he called me and he said, I got your letter. Can you sell tickets? I said, yes. And then I got hired.
wow.
So that
And
began my full-time job in an arts organization, really focusing on building community and bringing in audiences, particularly Black and Brown audiences. At that time, in the mid 80s, Black people really weren't going to see a lot of classical ballet. There wasn't a lot of mirrors of that other than for Dance Theater of Harlem and maybe some soloists here and there. But there was not a real cultivated movement to engage people of color as audiences for ballet, and that they would be welcomed and that they would understand exactly what they're seeing. So that was the hole that I saw, and I knew I could fill that hole. I knew it because of my passion. I just used myself.
you used your passion to reach out. How was that transition from here? We would like for you to sell tickets, and then you realize that there's a gap. So what were your first steps, Dana?
Well, so my first steps was gathering people around me who shared my interest and passion. Even if they didn't really know ballet, they were just interested in being a part of a cultural movement. And because, certainly at that time, the majority of the dancers at Dancing of Harlem were African American or of African descent, people felt more inclined to want to support the company. And we had things that were available. We had open house. So once a month, I could invite people to come and see the company in the studio, like up close. And there would be nice receptions afterwards where people could eat and talk with each other. So that was important. I did a lot of group sales. I worked with groups. I worked with church groups, women's civic organizations, creating experiences. I would get gifts for them. I remember for one performance, we were working, where were we? I think we were at the Met. Lincoln Center, yeah, at the Met Opera House, and we were performing there, and I was able to get cosmetics bags from Revlon to give as gifts to one of the women's groups. So on their chairs were these gift bags of just cosmetics. These women were just so excited. Would grab it. Now, these were very wealthy women. They could easily buy whatever was in that bag. But it was the fact that it was a gift and it was a surprise. So what that does, it buys you not only their enjoyment for that one day, but they're going to talk about this forever. They're going to talk about, we went to see the ballet and they gave us gifts. I mean, people don't understand. It's those small steps that builds the loyalty and the engagement. So I tried to do as many of those kinds of things as possible.
Wow. So the little steps.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. I'm learning. I'm learning. When
Yeah.
you talk about the champions of the arts, who do you
Mhm.
see in your mind, Donna? What
Yes.
makes someone a true champion?
So I wrote the book, Champions for the Arts, for two reasons. One, I wanted to create a movement where we are acknowledging people in front of us, our local business owners, educators, faith-based leaders who support and embrace the arts. Those are champions for the arts. And I also wrote the book because we have to bring the arts to where people live. That's a community engagement component. This audience development is very targeted marketing to reach a specific demographic for one purpose, and that is to buy tickets. But community engagement, there's no expectation to buy a ticket. It's to take the art form to where people live and play and work and let them see and feel what that's like. I think everyone should have access to the various kinds of arts. What you choose to do after that, that's your choice. But it shouldn't be limited to you have to buy a ticket in order to experience this great work. And so I want to create a movement where there's more samplings, there's more workshops, there's more master classes, performances, that there's more of these opportunities in specific communities. Then I think organically we will build our audiences because people will say, wow, I just took this dance workshop. Where can I go and see an actual performance? It will happen organically.
And when we talk about marketing and community building and outreach,
Mhm.
after you worked for the company, did you for Harlem Ballet, did you transfer to different companies to utilize your knowledge? Did you start working as a consultant because you saw that there were a lot of companies that were struggling and really were
Right.
doing the same thing again and again and not bringing the audience? How the next transition came about?
Yes. I worked for Dance Theater of Harlem for 9 years, and I was able to tour around the world with the company, doing the same thing, audience development, regardless of where we were, when we were in Cairo, when we were in Russia, when we were in South Africa, when we were in South America, wherever we went, that was the goal. Let's bring in as many local people as possible and those who would not necessarily be exposed to classical ballet. After 9 years, I got a phone call from George C. Wolfe, who was then the producer at the New York Shakespeare Festival, the Public Theater. And also, he's a Broadway producer. He had Jelly's Last Jam, Angels in America, the Colored Museum. Those all were in production at that time. And he called me and he said, I heard about you. He said, I have been here at the Public Theater for 3 months, and I've noticed the audiences are predominantly white. And I'd like this place to look like a subway stop. How would you do it? So I just shared with him what I've been doing. I mean, I know how to get Black people in to see classical ballet. I did it in LA. I did it in the Midwest. I did it all over the country. So I know how to do that. And I would presume I could use similar strategies for other different racial groups. I was just confident about that. Not that I had ever done it. I'd never engaged anyone from the Hispanic community, Asian American, LGBTQ in a formal way, but I knew that basic tools that are welcoming, engaging, making the space available, I knew I could make that happen. So I just shared with him what I was thinking. I didn't think there was a position. I just thought he was, wanted to tap into my brain knowledge. But he called me a week later and said, when can you start? How many people would you like in your department? And what will you give the name of your department? So I thought I was dreaming. So this can't possibly be happening. But it did. It did. And so it was a real struggle to leave Mr. Mitchell and Dance Theater of Harlem because that was my heart, my whole identity, everything was there. But I knew it was time to grow. I knew it was time to experience a new genre. I knew nothing about theater, absolutely nothing. And so that was exciting. I was like, okay, let's jump in. Geographically, I'm in a whole new neighborhood. The Public Theater is located in the Village in New York, in Manhattan. I had been working up in Harlem for 9 years. And so I just felt like, what a great opportunity. So I said yes, and I began. And I used everything I'd learned working at Dance Theater of Harlem. I applied it to theater and expanded that even more.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Donna. So this is going to be, for me, it's very, very important question, but we have to,
Okay.
I believe, going back to your book, go back to what's going on in our country right now. There's a lot of blind spots in our arts organization, many of our arts organizations, and we all know that. But when it comes to racism and inequality, what are those? Can you identify some of them? And also, maybe you can recommend a couple of steps to begin a real healing process and the process of change.
Yes. So you asked what are some examples of racism or
Blind
lack of
spots, yes, of
okay.
what some of the examples that maybe we don't see it right away, but when you come as a consultant to organizations, you see the
Sure.
a commonality among different arts organizations.
It's a really important question. The subtleties of it. That's where the real work is. And to be as courageous as possible and realize that I have to change, and this is so what happened for me as soon as the pandemic began and we were all quarantined at home, even though we were told, oh, it'll just be a few weeks, which ended up being a few years. But because there were no shows, there were no tickets to sell, arts organizations actually started to look inward. So that was one piece. Then you had the murder of George Floyd, which created this huge rush of organizations and corporations, but primarily arts organizations that posted statements of support on their websites. And then you had this huge rush of arts organizations, and this is classical music, ballet, this is in jazz, this was in all the genres, now seeking to build their diversity initiatives. So right here in this same chair, I conducted my business for those 3 years that we were in quarantine. I didn't move. I was here sometimes 10 hours a day, consulting with arts organizations around the country who really wanted to see how do we incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of our business practices. So I developed a curriculum because I've been a college professor now for 35 years. So I know how to build curriculums and teach. And I developed a curriculum that allowed us to go deep into our own behavior, who we are, how do we identify, how do we engage with people who are different from us, through some workshops, through exercises, and then talk about action steps. Okay, what can we do to start to change the environment? And it starts with the person. It's not them, it's ye. And once you understand, I'm the one that has to change how I look at people who are different from me. I have to be mindful of my language, how I describe people. I have to seek out history and understand not revisionist history, but the truth of what happened to people of color. And that's their responsibility to do that. So I provide lots of reading materials, abundance of TED Talks. You know, we go hard. You know, this was not some little lighthearted conversation. No, we were really pushing forward because I wanted to give them as much knowledge as possible, but also to empower them to seek as much information as possible. And so with that, you know, I was able to work with, oh, I'm sure at least 50, 60 arts organizations, really helping them to build their culture of diversity, equity, inclusion. That's cultural because that's behavior. That's really looking at who do we hire? Who do we do business with? Who's in my cast? Am I always casting the same people from the same 3 Ivy League schools? Or am I looking at the historical Black colleges and universities? Am I looking there for resources? Who do I hire for my printing, for my flowers? Do I use diverse businesses for that? Who comes in to do coaching, you know, for my artists? Is it always the same people? How am I expanding the landscape? So we looked at all of this best practices to see what are good ways that we can build a healthier organization. We looked at, you know, how do we create communities within each organization? So I developed employee resource groups for many of the arts organizations. They didn't have those before. And employee resource groups are affinity groups, you know, shared interests. So whether it was African American, Hispanic, Asian, it might be women, it could be military, it could be mothers, shared interests, people coming together at work to feel a sense of community. But by doing this, then they feel that they're part of an organization that cares about them. So we built those as well. And we came up with, you know, standards of conduct. You know, what's required to be a part of this? You know, how do you speak to people? How do you make sure you're having eye contact, that you're listening respectfully, that you honor the different generations within an organization? You've got some people in their 20s, you got some people in their 60s and 70s. How do we make sure they all feel they belong? Because the belonging and inclusion is the really important component of sustainability. Because you want to keep good people. Okay, how do you keep them? They feel like they belong. They feel like you care. Well, how do you do that? Honoring who they are. So that might mean looking at Heritage Month celebrations. Okay, so what are we doing for Women's History Month? For, you know, Juneteenth, for Day of the Dead. What are we doing? Asian American Pacific Islanders Month. How can we acknowledge these different cultures and celebrate them? So those are some of the things that I did during that period. And of course, we still do it now, but with the current era of erasure of DEI, there's less a movement of arts organizations to be as engaged as they were before this administration. I definitely can see that.
So you believe that, Dana, uh, all the policies in Washington, D.C. affecting our art organizations right now? And can you give, without calling out, of course, some of the
Sure.
examples of those? Because I believe it's very, very important.
Well, certainly the colleges that have been banned from, implementing any kind of diversity initiatives, it really prohibits the students from flourishing, from understanding about different cultures, from studying their own culture. And so that means then if I'm not allowed to experience this, then it means I have to either go someplace else or I miss it. I just miss all of that. And so I think it becomes more imperative for the communities to provide information to fill in those gaps. So this is where the faith-based community can be even more focused on this, presenting cultural events, teaching the community about who they are, youth-based organizations. Now's the time to really look at what are the local resources we have. How can they be a part of building cultural awareness? So that's one area I definitely see. Then you have the financial piece. So, it's been pulled away. We see in corporate America. So I just do a lot of work with corporations. Corporations were really pushing towards having diversity initiatives. They had big promotional plans. Even my dear colleague was sharing with me that the Black cosmetic companies are closing because so many of the big corporations that used to sell their products have stopped ordering. So they can't make any money. So they have to shut down. And so the economic impact is tremendous. And it will continue to definitely be a very, very difficult time because it affects everything. Quality of life, what you can purchase, where you can get it, tuition that's being, removed, the whole idea of focusing on providing financial resources for students of color, with that being removed, then that means that how do I pay for college? So the impact is enormous, enormous.
Yes. So talking about American nonprofit structure for the arts and also economics of it, because I started Jersey City Theater Center for that very reason. I didn't see a lot of immigrant in American theater, and I wanted to make sure that this organization is inclusive. And it's interesting because African American community started coming and supporting me and eventually asked me to join I Love Greenville and serve their community. And as immigrant, I was, of course, humbled and honored, and they are my biggest supporters. I am 100% with you, Donna. I know that it's all about how you invite people in, and it's not only about the business or my events. The relationship goes back and forth. But what I
Mm-hmm.
find,
That's right.
it's reciprocal. It's like we help each other with everything. It's can be
Mm-hmm.
just a conversation, it can be space, it's we share. But when it comes to the board and fundraising, because our board is very diverse, it is very challenging, I have to say, because most of us immigrants, when there's no old money, no big money, it's difficult to survive. Other board members hesitate to join because we don't have big money on our board. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any
Mm-hmm.
suggestions for organizations like Jersey City Theater Center? And yet, of course, a lot of federal, also foundations, everybody is looking for matching grants, right? Not so much the state, but I'm
Yes.
saying, so how do you feel we should navigate through all of that?
Yes. Great question. From a fundraising perspective, I would first offer that it doesn't have to be the big checks that allow you to be philanthropic. That oftentimes we need your services. We need your brain trust. We need volunteers. And so sometimes people kind of dismiss that, but we actually need you. And so that is a very important way of contributing to the health of any arts organization. And so it's talking with the leadership there to see, okay, what are the needs that you have outside of the checks, because we're going to do our best with that, and host fundraisers and small little cocktail events, host things at your home. And so we don't have to get lost in thinking that it's got to be $1 million contributions. It's whatever you have that's more than what they have. So it's all going to be helpful, no matter what. And then looking at how do we set up sustainable ways of giving? It's like we're accustomed to maybe tithing. We think about that for the arts. How can how many organizations can I join and I can contribute to them monthly? Because that's what funders actually like to see. They want to know, how many members do you have? How many people believe in what you're doing? And so I do that. I contribute to a number of arts organizations because I know the value of it, but also I believe in what they're doing. Appreciate getting information from them, and it's very diverse. I contribute to, Native American, to Asian American, of course, African American, Latino, youth-based, the college funds, all those things. It's not like I have a lot of money, but I do know the value of being present and indicating my support. And so that's one way, is to think so much about what I don't have, but let's focus on what you do have. And like-minded people to do the same. And so you can build a community of people, and together you might find you can give several $100s as a group, that this organization can rely on. And then that you will be there as a volunteer, that you will, be the ushers. You might be there to answer the phone or respond to emails. There's so many ways we can support that we forget. And that has a number on it too. So not all currency is green. And there's a currency that we need to get from our various communities. So it's time for people to step up, and think about, what can I do to support the arts? Those are champions. Those are the
Oh,
champions.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Dana, very often, very, very often, all the foundations sponsor measure our impact, right, by numbers.
Right.
And the work that we are talking about, building bridges, is very time consuming, and you have to put a lot of yourself, a lot of you. It's not immediate. It's a long term. And you talk in your book about that too, that it's a long term building for the organization. And yet, we have these measures of numbers. So, how do
Mhm.
you think we should, as arts organization leaders, measure our true impact? Because not always it is.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really difficult. It's almost as if they're wired, they're programmed for numbers. It's really hard to looking at success beyond the numbers. That's a very challenging skill. But I think that's what allows us to have healthy arts organizations. I think the more that we rely on just the percentages or the numbers, we miss the people. So we need both. Absolutely. You want to be able to say we had a full house or we sold out or whatever that looks like. But even if you get the 10 people who came, those 10 people, what do they represent? Oh my goodness, this one's head of this company, this head of this organization. So there's a real value that can sometimes happen on a much lower scale than what we're thinking about, just the numbers. And that's the job that we have to do as arts administrators. We have to be able to narrate what success looks like, not to get stuck on just the numbers, but the people who came, what they said, get their comments. What are the connections they have? So it's like I have 5 people that came, but they're all part of various organizations with significant membership. Because they came, they will then speak to their membership. And so we want to talk about that kind of long-term impact, and that has as much value as if you had had the 500 people there at present for that one event. And so I think it really is the way we describe it, not apologizing, but the confidence in saying, we had 25 people come, and those 25 were rich, and they were rich in the following way. We have to start to change the narrative. And if we don't, it'll constantly just be, oh, well, that was a failure. You only had half the house. No, but do you know who was in half the house? So that's up to us. We have to start to change that. So push back. push back when they start telling you what success looks like. No, let's get in control of the narrative and we say, this is what success looks like. For the first time, we had people from this neighborhood to come. They've never been here before. How can you dismiss that? So that's us. That's on us. You got to push back with authority and confidence.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Donna, for your
Welcome.
words. You know, being in Jersey City that never really had before performing arts center, and we have smaller organizations. So measuring impact for foundations and for the state and even for our donors is it's crucial to us. And sometimes it's like, oh, I'm only serving 10,000 people a year. I can't compete with bigger organizations. So, but thank you. Thank you. In your view, Dana, what is unique role the arts can play in strengthening our democracy, especially at the time of, like now, of the time of polarization, fear, war, destruction, disinformation, all of that. Yeah. So what do you think we can do as art leaders and also in terms of programming?
Yes. Well, certainly the programming, I think it should reflect the communities we serve. And I think we have to be brave to try something new. So yes, you have your usual, the things that you know are going to bring in earned revenue. Absolutely. But there has to be room within programming and your budget to allow for new works, for new artists, because otherwise how does a field grow? So that takes a lot of courage. And frankly, you fundraise against that so that you can identify resources that will allow you to bring in new work, new artists nobody's ever heard of, a new kind of art form. Wow, we've never done that before, but let's try it. And this is where your volunteers and your community support comes in, because these are things they may want to rally around. You know, do they want to support the Nutcracker, which we do every year? Or do they want to try a new kind of art form? We've never had that before. I'm interested in that one. And so we need a menu, this menu that provides different tastes so people can fit in with what their passion is. And so if it's only programming one thing, then you're kind of knocking out any other possibility. So there has to be space to try something new. And it may be just something once per year that we try new work. Fine, let's do that. But create a committee around that. Surround that art for success. So, you know, if it's a new dance piece, okay, what's the theme? What's it about? Okay, let's find people who just like dance in general, or people who believe in supporting young people, you know, whatever it is that's like the theme. And so we're the committee for success. And we're going to help promote. We're going to help sell tickets. We're going to talk about this in our digital space. That's how we can embrace new work and not look at programming as just, you know, this rigid way of building our season. But in fact, there's space to grow. And then making sure that the pieces that you do promote are really going to sell well so that you're making that budget, because I know how important that is. Absolutely, this is the time to use your voice, your platform, to engage new communities, to think about fundraising in new ways, and to be brave and move forward with building diverse audiences, diverse programmings, not to run away from that word. You know, as artists, if you look through the history of time, this is what we've always done. Why would we stop now? And so this is the time to rely on all of the different resources we have for our board to step up. I sit on 5 boards. So for board members to really step up and say, okay, I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to lead with this. I'm going to talk with people about it. There's a bravery and courage that's required right now for the arts. And you have to ask yourself, what are you afraid of? And if you can't come up with anything, which I know you can't, then move forward and talk about it together and build a collective. That's what we need from our arts leadership. Yes, their job is to make sure the lights are on and artists are paid. Absolutely. But there's a whole nother space open now for us to look at how do we present the arts in new ways. Let's do that. Let's do
Thank you,
that.
Donna. And if you were to give one advice to emerging arts leaders who just starting out, what would that advice be from you? So
Make sure you
emerging
have a mentor.
art.
Yep. Make sure you have at least one mentor. You have to have that guidance. You must. So that's what I would encourage them. Someone you trust, who's experienced, who has demonstrated the kind of success you're aspiring towards, and who is agreeing to work with you. So you need a mentor. Absolutely. Cannot move forward without that. Any emerging and mid-career, and I have 3 mentors. I will always have mentors. Yes. You need one, at least one. Yeah.
Can you please be my mentor, Donna? Using the
Anytime.
space.
Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're
So,
welcome.
champions for the arts, Donna Walker-Kuhne, please. Thank you so much, Donna. What an incredible conversation. And trust me, if you get this book, you will learn so much. It's going to be on my night table, and I'm learning and reading different chapters at different times because this work is not of one conversation, not of one, it's a
That's right.
lifetime work. And
That's
thank you,
right.
Donna, for the lifetime of work building bridges among people, communities through the arts. Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
so
I
much.
love that. Lifetime
Thank
work.
you.
I like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Arts and Democracy podcast, a global conversation with Olga Levina. The Arts and Democracy podcast is produced, recorded, and edited by Shane Austin Miller from Seize the Day Communications. Be sure to check out upcoming global arts performances and programs at Jersey City Theater Center. Until next time, support the arts and defend democracy.